Welcome back to the What is Money Show. I'm sitting down today with Mr. John Vervaeke once again, and we're going to continue our exploration of cognitive science and its relationship to human action. And today, John, I wanted to ask for your help. I'm trying to figure out the connection between this term you've coined, psychotechnology,
right,
and the social institutions that bind us in the world.
Yes.
Again, the most fundamental and familiar psychotechnologies being literacy, numeracy.
Right.
These seem pretty fundamental to human interaction and thus our social institutions. So are social institutions, if we follow this software analogy a little further, I was kind of thinking that psychotechnologies or social institutions rather may be applications of psychotechnologies to some extent. How would you describe this relationship?
I think our metaphors are close, but they're not exactly the same. I tend to think of the institutions as, well, here, let's try it this way. What do you do with the computer? You get a logical ordering of information, and then you get a causal ordering of physical entities. It could be electricity, copper, whatever, but you can technically you can build a computer out of water wheels and stuff like this. It'd just be vast, right? And slow, right? So what you have is you have a causal ordering of information and a causal ordering of events. A logical ordering of information and a causal ordering of events. And so in that very important sense, right? A computer is a logic machine where logic is a particular ordering of information that is designed to do truth preservation, right? And then a computer is a particular ordering events so that you get a reliable functionality. Hence, it's a machine, a logic machine. So here's the proposal I have to you, that the psychotechnologies are basically software for distributed cognition, and that social institutions are the hardware of distributed cognition. They are what we've done. So what you do in a computer is you order matter so that it's isometric to the logical order of information, and then you set things up so that they track with each other. So you can run the program, you can run the software on the hardware, and that's what a program is. What social institutions do is, right, they basically bind human endeavor. I'll use the term, and I'm trying to use it intentionally equivocally. I hope I won't get into a flaw here, between a more general sense and the sense in economics, perhaps, right? So what you're basically doing is you have to do two things to solve a problem. You have to order the flow of information in distributed cognition, and enhance and afford that flow of information. I take it that's what psychotechnologies do. But you have to also organize the causation, the causal relationship between people. So you're organizing their labor so that the information flow actually serves to coordinate the labor, and the flow of the labor actually provides a platform on which you can do the exchange of information that is needed for the psychotechnology to activate collective intelligence within distributed cognition. So I'm close to what I think you were saying, but because if I'm going to solve a problem, think about just me solving a problem. There's, and I don't believe in this strict distinction anymore in cognitive science between software and hardware, but I'll still use it right now, right? I have to run the software of the problem formulation, lay out the problem space, do all that stuff. But I also have to do this. I have to move my articulated body around in a highly coherent, right, and coordinated fashion, extended across time, interacting with changes in the environment. And then if I add in another person, the order of complexity doesn't double. It goes up by orders of magnitude, right? And so, right, and what I can do is I can create institutions that give us an ordering of causal interaction so that we can coordinate our the distributed labor part of our distributed cognition that is coordinated, I wouldn't quite say isomorphic, but at least coordinated with right, the flow of information, the coordination of the flow of information within distributed cognition so that we get intelligent behavior, we get intelligent labor, we get intelligent action, we get problem solving.
Okay, so if the social institution in this analogy, and I realize we're using hardware, software dichotomy, there's a blurred line there clearly.
Yeah.
Is this back to where we talked about consciousness being the aperture that took an ill-defined problem and made it clearly defined so that it could then be embedded in intelligence? And you wouldn't have to think about it as much. So the social institution is like a cognitive expedient, perhaps.
So that's a good way of thinking about it, especially if you think that computers are very, very good at well-defined problems and very, very poor at ill-defined problems.
Right.
That's reliable differences between us and them, which is one of the many reasons why a standard computational model of cognition is probably inadequate. And I can't go into that in detail. I have a lot of argument and publications out there about that. I want to reinforce that I wanted to reinforce your reinforcement that we're using this dichotomy, but we're using it under a very critical eye. Right. We're just using explanatory. Yes. You know, the way we can use the solar system model of the atom, even though we know it's fundamentally false, to help our understanding, right?
It's a blunt instrument.
Yeah. So the degree to which we can, I think this will be a word that moves between these two domains. The degree to which we can formalize how people are supposed to causally coordinate and influence each other, so that we get something approaching an algorithm within distributed cognition for solving a well-defined domain of well-defined problem solvings. That's sort of how I would describe the functional requirements for a social institution to be enacting distributed cognition. It would have to do exactly that. It would have to be that, right? I could routinize and proceduralize how human beings are interacting with each other, because those procedures, when run reliably, can reliably be applied to this domain of problems. Mm-hmm. And because that domain is fairly well defined and the problems are within it are well defined, those procedures will reliably tend to solve that set of problems. But your point is, you're not going to human beings aren't billiard balls. They're not bouncing off against each other causally. Our behavior, this is the whole part of the cognitive revolution in the 50s, our behavior is not driven by the physical properties of stimuli, but by the meaning. And that's why we have to have all this psychotechnology managing the meaning, right? The meaning of the information flow that is coordinated with, like I said, the proceduralization of behavior.
Okay, that makes sense. I would, just to add to the terminology we're using here, Nick Szabo, who's a prolific writer in the space, he distinguishes between wet code and dry code to kind of add to this analogy. So I think the ill-defined problem, that's kind of the wet code, whereas the defined problem is dry code. And his point is that computers are great with dry code, terrible with wet code, but that's what we deal with. That's as humans.
Yeah. That's it. There are many metaphors. I suppose, I do not know his work, that what he's trying to pick up on with the wet code, which is something we've been sort of keep alluding to, is that the non-computational aspects of neuronal interaction, for example, even the neurotransmitter and endocrinal aspects, but also all kinds of other more biological aspects of the neuron, the wetware, which we don't capture typically, even in our best neural network simulations, that is doing a lot of important work for ill-defined problems. And if that's what he's pointing to with that term, then I think I'm in agreement with that distinction.
Yes. And he, correct. Again, we're back to this situation where the more problems we can get into dry code and have those solved, very efficiently by either, I guess, social institutions or computers, the more we can scale as humans, right? We're freeing ourselves up to focus on other more complicated or more wet code problems.
Yeah. So so what the Industrial Revolution did, the way it afforded at least approximate elimination of slavery in the world,
Mhm.
right? The computer revolution in the same way did that for a lot of problem solving.
Yes.
Now, our culture hasn't totally caught up because what we've done is instead of focusing on the problems, we do to some degree, but instead of focusing on the problems that the wetware problems
Mhm.
that human beings, we've actually just also just created a lot of bullshit jobs.
Right. Yes.
A lot of,
Government jobs.
and other jobs. There's lots of bullshit jobs, right? And so, and more people. The reason I bring that up is more people are reporting that that's their attitude
Yes.
towards their work, which means they basically, I mean, just mathematically, they think of a third of their life as bullshit.
Yes.
That is very corrosive, very, very corrosive. So sorry, that was a little aside. I just wanted to bring to
that's an important aside, though, and I think free market economists would argue that the more government intervention you have, which is more regulation, more red tape, more bureaucracy, the more bullshit jobs you have. Not only the government jobs themselves, but everyone else. That's all the other market actors that are forced to comply with these overly complicated codes. That's the bullshit aspect. So the more free market you become, the more accountable all organizations are to the preferences of their customers, which is a very economizing force. It kind of clears the bullshit or clears the problems more efficiently. That's my own aside there on your side.
Okay.
I want to try to progress this conversation. So psychotechnologies are software we're running. Yeah. Right, programs. It's a way of systemizing our cognition, streamlining our interactions and communications.
Basically, according to really what it does is it releases the power of distributed cognition, both within an individual across time, and also across individuals synchronically, and also across individuals across time. So there's sort of three dimensions in which it expands the amount of, I'll use this, and it's a meaningless term, but people use it, the amount of brain power we can bring to bear on any problem.